Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another special edition of the show alongside Mr. Phil Aston from Now Spinning Magazine, and of course, the great Martin Popoff. What's up, gentlemen?
Yeah, doing okay. Just not much. We've got we've definitely got summer here back again. So yeah, just looking for a nice peaceful day here in Toronto.
Yeah, it's
Hot and
just
humid in New York.
it's either blisteringly hot here or just torrential downpours.
That's what it's been here, Phil. So I
Yeah,
guess it's like
Yeah,
it's UK and New York right now. So yeah,
yeah.
not
yeah.
much different. It's we had deluge of rain the other day, and now the sun is out, and it's going to be hot for the next couple of days, and whatever. It's summertime. So, and what better thing to talk about in the summertime than Black Sabbath, right? Sure, why not? We can talk about Sabbath each and every day, given the ability to do so. And so today we're going to kind of do a little twist, though. Last week the three of us talked about the Deep Purple family tree, the big four in the Deep Purple kind of family tree, and we kind of ranked those albums and the catalogs in the order of our preference. We're going to kind of do the same thing today, but with Sabbath, we're going to do the solo albums of the original four members. So we've got Ozzy, who has a ton of solo albums, and you got the other three who have very few. So we've each over the last week kind of gone back and listened and reviewed the solo catalogs of Tony, Geezer, Bill, and Ozzy, and try to figure out, well, which catalogs do we prefer over the others and put them in some sort of order. So we'll start with Martin today to kind of kick us off with his, I guess, number four out of the solo catalogs.
All right. Well, I'm going to start with Tony Iommi or whatever you want to call him. Iommi Hughes. Who knows what he's called? And unfortunately, I actually don't have any commercial. I've just got all these ridiculous advances. That's all I've kind of got left here. I'm not sure if I ever owned it. And, I've got a little card in here. There you go. With my notes on it when I had to interview Tony for one of these before. And then we got a fused there. And then we've got whatever this thing is. Oh, this is some sort of interview disc. That's right. This was kind of a cool thing. So yeah, that's my ragged collection there. So he had the Iommi album October 17th, 2000. The problem with Tony is yeah, he is just the guitarist sort of thing. He can write, but then yeah, so he does this one where he's got all these guest vocalists on, huge vocalists on the thing as well. But yeah, those things are always kind of a novelty album. You've got the Probot thing, that Michelle or that Dave Grohl did before. Then he's got the Fused album. Well, yeah, so the 1996 DEP sessions, which is older material where it's at least a little more. It's a little more musical and not right down the one trick pony thing Tony seems to do as a solo career, which is just slow and sluggish and heavy and doomy, and even moving into that period, that thing we don't like that Ozzy does later in his career, and that thing we don't like when doom crosses with grunge kind of thing. So he's got that going forward as well. But the DEP sessions are a little bit different that way. These always got mixed up with that whole Tipton thing going on too, right? I mean, the same sort of thing happened with Baptism of Fire and then those sessions that he had with Entwistle and stuff. Yeah, it's kind of the same complicated, weird story. But then he's got the Fused album where it comes together more so as a band, although it's almost as much as an Iommi as it is a Hughes, as it is a Bob Marlette situation. And again, that album, I mean, I just remember talking to either Tony or Glenn or both for it or whatever, but it's just every single thing on it is slow, and slow and mellow, except for like 1.5 songs or something. It's just so relentlessly, I don't know, it's not what I want out of my Sabbath, that's for sure. And maybe perhaps you even get a little bit of this on 13. You don't really get it in the Tony Martin years, but yeah, just this whole persona that Tony has kind of slowly creep out across these three disparate strange albums is just too much of that slow, sluggish, doomy Tony, too relentlessly so. And I don't know if Glenn Hughes is really that. There's that much chemistry or creativity that I really get excited about. Oh, I want to see these two guys work together, sort of thing. So that's my number four, Iommi.
Cool. Phil.
Okay. My number 4 is Bill Ward. Completely just off my radar. I think in the UK, I don't think I'll be alone in this, is that we'd heard that Bill Ward was going to do solo albums and stuff, but they came out with such low level publicity that they just passed me by. And the bits I have heard over the years, I haven't felt connected enough to go after them. I'm probably one of those few people that doesn't connect to Never Say Die, or I love It's All Right from Technical Ecstasy.
I'm with you, Phil.
But when he sang Elsewhere, it just didn't make me think I must go and get a Bill Ward solo album. So I didn't. And so Bill sits at the bottom of my Black Sabbath pyramid in that respect.
I will say that this assignment was kind of difficult because arguably all 4 of these solo catalogs have lots of problems for me. I think that, we all love Sabbath so much, and there's so many albums in the Sabbath catalog that are just treasured to me. And then it's always kind of depressed me that the solo catalogs of these 4 guys is fairly lackluster across a lot of them. There's some gems here, don't get me wrong, but so trying to look at all 4 of them and figure this out was a challenge. And so I've been working alongside Martin now for a bunch of years, and I've been hearing him talk about the Bill Ward solo catalog for a long time. So when I finally set aside to go and listen to them all to do this show, I didn't know what to think after listening to the Bill Ward stuff. It's going to come in at number 4 for me, just because I just can't grasp what's going on with these albums. So, Ward won along the way. Again, it's kind of like the Iommi album. There's like there's a ton of people on this album. I think he's proven to be a pretty capable singer. I mean, vocally, I
agree.
Right. Ozzy's on this one too. It's heavy, it's industrial, it's all over the place. It's an interesting listen. I don't know if I understand it, but it's an interesting listen. Then you got When the Bow Breaks from '97, and it's totally different. It's kind of bluesy, it's kind of hard rock, there's horns. It's more of like a band effort. You got Bill singing alongside, lots of female backing vocals. He doesn't play any drums on it at all. In fact, I don't know how much drums he plays on any of these things. But it's really interesting and it's really different. And then you get Accountable Beast from 2015, which is like really heavy. But his vocals sound really bizarre on this album. And again, there's many years in between. So obviously 2015, he's, much older and whatnot. Higher pitched vocals. The guitars are really angry, metally, but then there's this strong Beatles thing going on. I hear like Mr. Bungle, I hear Devin Townsend, I hear Black Sabbath, I hear the Beatles. For me, it's like all over the place. It's the best of the 3 for me, but it's still really weird. So, Martin's got a longer history with Bill's solo albums. So again, someone coming in new, I didn't know what to expect, and it just threw me out to left field. So it's almost like he gets there by default. I think I need way more time with these albums to really understand what's going on there. These 3 albums are the most impenetrable out of all of these solo catalogs. That the Iommi stuff is easy to listen to because you know what you're going to get. Martin hit the nail on the head. It's very plodding in one note. And then you put on the Bill Ward solo albums. It's like, that's not that at all. It's just, I don't know. So it's number 4. Bill's is number 4 for me, but I know it's going to be completely different on Martin's, but back to Martin
later.
Yeah.
All right. My number 3 is the Geezer catalog. There's your Black Science. So what I like about Geezer is he really tried to stay with the times. He kind of came up with this modern metal approach. You got Plastic Planet, October 26, 95 on TVT, Black Science. This one was July 1st, 97. So came back pretty quickly, less than 2 years later. New vocalist. So he started with Burton C. Bell and he moves over to Clark Brown. And then he does Homework, May 10th, 25. He has a lot of puns in his song titles and stuff. And that came out on Sanctuary. And I'm not crazy about the catalog, but I'm happy that he did what he did, which is kind of like a slightly deathy, slightly thrashy, slightly industrial, slightly new metal sort of sound. So you melange all that together. It's not very melodic. It has kind of a robotic feel to it. And Burton and Clark. So Clark is actually on both of them. They only changed the drummer between the two. They get Chad Smith in, which isn't the Chad Smith. He's a Chad Smith from St. Louis. You know, Geezer has that weird those ties to St. Louis. But I think both vocalists along the way do a lot of again thrash, more the aggressive end of thrash, but not quite a death metal vocal. And they both throw in the Burton C. Bell patented oh, I'm thrashing now, and now I'm Mr. Operatic, you know, emotional singer kind of guy. And Clark kind of picked that up, so you don't feel a big difference between the two. So I've always liked, you know, I like the artwork on them. I thought it was kind of interesting how Geezer is messing with his name and makes it so hard to figure out what the hell the band name is called, right? On all three, they're different, right? But so I appreciate the effort, and I appreciate him trying to stay young and stay current and come up with a viable band. And it is a band, which is cool as well. So it really does feel like a tactical unit going out there trying to conquer the world. But I never assimilated them too fully because of just this. Well, you know, part of it is the lack of a narrative with your lead vocalist, which is so important, right? You know, there's just that disconnect because unfortunately Geezer isn't going to be the lead singer here. So yeah, never got crazy about the three albums, but I appreciate the effort, and I appreciate him trying to stay young and creative. So Geezer's my number 3.
Cool. Phil?
Geezer's my number 3 as well. I've got the albums, and like Martin, I agree that it was interesting that he redid his focus on doing something that was kind of in vogue at the time, you know, the kind of thrashy, industrial kind of new metal stuff. But I have to be really honest, as much as I listen to lots of music like that, where it's Opeth or bands like that, but I found it difficult to get into what Geezer was trying to do with these albums. I think it's probably just me, but it was the lack of melody in some of the songs. And again, I was thinking, what is my perception of Geezer Butler? He's bubbling bass that is from Sabbath, is fantastic lyricism, and he's as a wordsmith. And I just felt that this music for me kind of was hard for me to penetrate. Not that there's anything wrong with it. It just didn't press the right buttons for me. Maybe it's because there was too much history to what I expect from Geezer, what I've known from all the different incarnations of Sabbath, or whatever. This was just, it feels like it's of its time. I mean, I bought the little box set with them all in, and I listened to them over the last few days, and I still feel the same about it. So Geezer would be in 3rd place for me.
Yeah, Geezer's my number 3 as well. Quite frankly, I don't hear enough Geezer in this stuff. Yeah. I think that's what it is. It's like, you know, he's there, but the Geezer Butler that we know and love is, if you take his name off of it, would you ever know that he's involved in this? Maybe not, right?
No, I don't think so.
And I agree with something that Martin said. These albums are really harsh, right? And Phil mentioned lack of melody, and they're really from their time, right? And what's really interesting is that when you look at, you know, 95, 97, and 2005, or when these albums came out, there's a lot of bands that were pretty happening and popular on the scene, you know, like Disturbed and Fear Factory, and we could name all sorts of other ones that I hear little elements of in this music. So I'm kind of surprised that this band didn't do better, seeing as they had, you know, the guy from Black Sabbath playing bass in the band. But Martin, did they tour much at all? I don't even remember hearing them touring.
Remember, you know, probably know it. Like I said, like I joke all the time, nobody wanted to write about it because nobody knew how to spell the band name. You know,
yeah, it's just it's like confusing, right? But
yeah.
You know, arguably these are some of the heaviest albums in all these catalogs here. I mean, there's some, like, the Homework is crushingly heavy, but I find a lot of the material very schizophrenic and just kind of like I don't know. it just doesn't do a ton for me. And I'm not a big industrial guy. I'm not a big new metal guy, but I think that this was interesting for him to do. And like Martin said, I give him credit for doing something like a younger guy's form of metal, right? Because all the young bands were coming out doing this sort of thing. And Geezer was like, all right, we're going to do this. And he had some good players with him. There's some crushing riffs on these albums. But to me, overall, I don't find them all that much interesting. Like, this is not something I would ever reach for, but I appreciate the fact that he did these. And I guess it's kind of a shame that it didn't do any better. I wonder, though, I was sitting there thinking as I was listening to these and jotting down some notes, I wonder, like, looking back, what Geezer thinks of these albums all these years later, right? Whether he thinks that this was something that he just kind of fell into, or whether he feels really proud of it. I don't know. We'll never know, I guess. He doesn't really mention it in his book all that much that I just got done reading. So he doesn't go into too much detail about the solo albums. But anyway, back to Martin.
Interesting. All right. I like what you said, Pete, about all these catalogs having problems in them. And my number two's definitely got some problems as well. My number one doesn't have any problems because my number one is Bill Ward. And I think the only problem is he didn't make more records. So, but the Ozzy catalog has problems that we all never want to talk about. And it always makes us not do Ozzy shows and not do Ozzy rankings. Just this whole idea of it just started to feel like a corporate manufactured sort of situation somewhere in the middle of No More Tears on its way forward, right? So that always kind of annoys me, that whole thing where it's just, kind of a lot of what we said about the Geezer catalog is the same with the Ozzy catalog. But of course, it's an amazing, huge catalog. He's a massive hit, one of the biggest rock stars of all time. And the first three albums, I always include Bark at the Moon. I think it's incredible. And I really have a soft spot for No Rest for the Wicked as well. So I have four Ozzy albums I just completely love to death. And of course, we love the first two. So yeah, that's always great. The other problem with putting, where is Ozzy as a solo artist? What is his personality? Well, we know he's the front man. He's the guy leading the party. I'm sure he's in there picking material and picking players and picking vocal melodies, but he's not particularly writing the lyrics, certainly not writing the music. I'm sure he even has some control over the lyrics and what he wants to say and what he doesn't want to say, but he's not the key songwriter across all this as well, which always bothers us too. So that's the other, big problem here. And just the endless, will he play live? Can he play live anymore? He just begged off of the Power Trip thing, right? Of course, we all knew that was coming.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, the Ozzy catalog, super long catalog. Unfortunately, there's a lot of it that just leaves me sort of cold. It's like, I know this is all made by committee. It's not really Ozzy. And that bothers me.
Yeah, I hear you. Phil?
Okay, number two for me is Tony Iommi. I actually like Tony's catalog, but I also agree that all the songs are at a certain pace. So it's like a Tyrannosaurus Rex plodding through the forest, isn't it? With a big guitar. You probably all got this album, which was a compilation with Gil and Iommi.
Yeah.
Well, there's two tracks from there which were outtakes from Fused, and they're really fast. That really fast rock songs. And the first thing when I heard them was thinking, why were those left off? Why weren't those the leading tracks on each side if it was vinyl back then? But I feel that with the first one, like I agree with you, Pete, they're not perfect. There's fault lines going through them. And obviously it was a tricky time for any classic rock star in that period, thinking about what should they do to remain valid. And he had a lot of guest singers who, looking back now, not all of them are remembered as well as they were at the time. So again, it's, as you say, there's a bit of novelty to that, but there are some really good tracks on that. And obviously this one, the Depth Sessions and Fused, are probably the ones that I like the most. But I just want to throw the dice into a little bit of a hypothetical at this point, because when we think about the Iommi catalog, bear with me, I'm not going to take up too much time, but we all know that this was supposed to be Seventh Star, a Tony Iommi solo album. The cover with this picture on the front, it's almost as if the only thing that changed was sticking the word Black Sabbath on. It was probably just going to say Tony Iommi, Seventh Star, with Hughes was on it, and all of a sudden the powers that be said, no, it has to be Black Sabbath. If that had gone out as a Tony Iommi solo album, would it change our perceptions when we add the other albums to the catalogue? Because it had the fast tracks, it had the driving riffs, it had the mixture of songs. It so far isn't a Black Sabbath album, but it does sound like a Tony Iommi album, and it does fit in with the other albums in his catalogue. It's a bit of a wild card, but would it change our perceptions if it had been the first album in that series?
You want my answer?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd probably still have him at 4, probably.
Yeah, no, it would for me. Iommi's my number 2. Quite frankly, I never listened to this. It's okay. There's some good stuff on here, but I've never been a big fan of let's do an album with 5 million different vocalists but there's some good stuff on here. I mean, I think the track he does with Phil Anselmo is great. Time If Mine, I love that. I think the song with Ozzy is really good. Some of the other stuff, it's okay. I like both of these quite a bit, and I'm someone who loves 7 Star. So Phil, I agree with you. If we were to say 7 Star is a Tony Iommi solo album and put them together with these, I'm okay with that. Yeah, and I do agree with Martin to an extent that there's a sort of kind of sameness and with the tempos and things on some of this stuff. And yeah, 7 Star has the faster bangers on it for sure. But man, I really like this a lot. I think that there's some just great melodies on these songs. I mean, Dopamine is great. Wasted Resolution song. I mean, I go insane. I love that. I've always liked the pairing of Tony and Glenn, and I would love to hear them do another album at some point. Whether it'll ever happen, I don't know. So, but as it is only 3 albums, and this one is kind of iffy for me. So I put him in at number 2, but it could easily be number 1 with another, like with a 7 Star involved, right?
Yeah,
for sure. All right, Martin, let's hear about Bill Ward.
So yeah, I think Bill Ward is an absolute songwriting genius, who hasn't given us enough records. We've only got Ward 1 along the way, January 10th, 1990. And I think it's just a sophisticated, cool, interesting, a real wow moment. You've got 2 tracks with Ozzy singing on them, 2 tracks with Jack Bruce singing on them. Jack Bruce plays bass. I read a YouTube comment that it never really dawned on me, but how do you describe Bill's voice? I think he sounds a little bit like Jack Bruce. I think he's got an amazing voice, and it's just like sort of like dripping with sort of wisdom and authority, and yet it's just such a bizarre, interesting voice. And he's not afraid to take it to the edge as well, which is where this music goes. So when the Bow Breaks came out, so this is April 27th, 97, I loved it to death. I mean, basically at this point, I feel like he epitomizes the idea of being like the Roger Waters of hard rock or heavy metal. But these records aren't even that particularly heavy metal in a big way. I know what you mean about Accountable Beast. It's got, to me, that's got almost more of like an emotional heaviness to it. But yeah, songs like Growth and Children Killing Children on When the Bow Breaks. And he's not playing drums on these. He's got an unknown band who, I mean, these guys write like, basically they write like Roger Taylor and Brian May. There's incredible writing, but I have a feeling a lot of it is Bill just rule breaking over and over and over again. Strange structures, just super interesting, super emotional. When Accountable Beast came out, I wrote this super long review, gave it a 10 out of 10. I think of the first track on there, Leaf Killers, like so gothic and proggy and just interesting. And again, Bill is like, I'm not the drummer on this, and the drumming is really cool. A lot of people complain about the mix, but I just love that even that's on the edge. Like there's this white knuckle feel to his vocals and the mixes. But I love that it's strange and sort of boomy, and there's like this overdrive thing that they do that Queen and Sweet did at times as well. There's a 10-minute track at the end called The Wall of Death, which is just an absolute masterpiece. I just think now, I've often thought like, oh man, well, for sure, like if Bill was in the band during, say, the Tony Martin years or with 13, and if Bill was allowed to write for this band, now I don't I don't think the Bill of 1990 or 1997 or 2015 is the same Bill Ward as a writer that you would have got back in 1975. But I almost feel like if somehow Bill was more of a forceful personality and he was bringing songs like this to the band in the late 90s and the 2000s, Sabbath would be an incredibly critically acclaimed band if they would even dare to do this kind of material. But yeah, to me, Accountable Beasts, there's nothing in the world that sounds like it. I think he's an absolute genius lyrically as well. The lyrics are incredible. And just compared to all the other guys in the band, he's just like five-dimensional chess moves ahead of all of them when it comes to writing. To like, okay, here's a song. It's like, what are you thinking? Right? It's just so bizarre what he's doing, and yet so musical at the same time. Like I say, I find like Roger Waters, but I also find that there's a King Crimson-esque quality and a Vandergraaf Generator quality for sure. It's really, really thespian and actorly. What he's doing. But yeah, I just think all three of these albums are absolute masterpieces. And just to add one more thing about the bizarro world of Bill Ward, every time you do an interview with him, it just got to be a joke after a while. It's like, I'm working on Beyond Aston. I'm working on my Beyond Aston album. Oh yeah, it's coming along. But I kind of put it aside to do Accountable Beasts or whatever. It's like, so in the background, there's this album for 20 years. He says, I've been working on, right. And obviously, he's not that capable a guy in terms of a can-do guy and getting things done. And we know there's some sort of fragility there with his personality and whatnot, and even his physical health. So yeah, to get these three albums spread apart so much. But yeah, I think it's just hilarious that while he gets this one out or whatever, and every time you talk to him, so hey, Beyond Aston's coming along and working on this and doing some songs for that and whatever. It's like, Beyond Aston, like, what is this, man? So I hope it comes out one day. But yeah, I just think out of all the guys, even beyond Geezer as a lyricist, or even beyond what you get on Sabotage, the guy's just an unheralded, like, near genius of songwriting. So there you go, Bill Ward, my number one.
And I think you have to give him credit because out of the four of them, he's the guy who's put out albums that were not like what you'd expect from someone from Black Sabbath, right? They're totally left field and so under the radar. I mean, out of the four of them, I mean, when do you ever hear about Bill Ward's solo album coming out? I mean, I don't think I remember any of those when they were released.
Yeah, so Ward 1 is super rare. It's not on Spotify. The second one is not on Spotify. Weirdly, the third one, Accountable Beast, which I guess never actually did come out physically at all, is only on Spotify. You can get them on YouTube as well. But to reinforce my crazy views on these, I mean, if you go play Accountable Beast on YouTube and go down and read the comments, like, people are just speechless. They're just stunned at
what is this?
Yeah.
A guy from Black
Sabbath, but mostly in a good way.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So,
well, I have to say that after hearing that from Martin, all I want to do now is listen to Bill Ward albums and let them go sink into my ears for again to see what I've been missing.
Well, you might think I'm nuts, so.
yeah, possibly.
I wanted to show my props here too. So, I just wanted to show this quickly. So this is he did a single for Straws, which is this crazy anti-war progressive thing, and then he sent them out and he numbered them and he signed them. And that's the cover of When the Bow Breaks, and that's a cool Bill Ward ad.
That is a brilliant feature.
That's the back cover of Straws that he put out, and that's the cool way he signs his name too. So what is that? 423 of 1200, Love Always, Bill Ward. And that's fantastic. And that's what the front of the Straws single looked like. So, the new album, full album, doesn't even come out physically, yet he's making physical singles.
Go figure, right?
Yeah, that's a bit back to front, but why not? Well, my first is obviously Ozzy. And I'm obviously from Birmingham in the UK. And so I just wanted, for perspective, I'm just going to sit back in 1978 and say that in Birmingham, as a teenager, Black Sabbath were huge. Ozzy was huge. People just loved him. But I remember going to see Sabbath in 1978 on the Never Say Die tour, the 10th anniversary tour, and they were awful. And Van Halen destroyed them. I mean, obviously, we all thought something called Van Halen could have been a folk singer. We had no idea what it was, but it just came on stage and annihilated everything that had happened. And Ozzy came across as being bloated and out of unfit, and it was just over for them. And then, of course, he left, and then Sabbath formed with Dio, and in Birmingham, this was a massive thing, and we went to see them, and they just took over, and we just forgot about Ozzy until we started hearing rumors of Blizzard of Oz, this new band featuring Ozzy, and then they were going to play at Reading that year, and then they pulled out, and Slade went in their place, and then eventually it was just going to be called Ozzy Osbourne, and the album was called Blizzard of Oz. And I remember going to see them at Birmingham Odeon, and it was packed, and obviously it was first time we'd seen Randy Rhoads and that band, and it was like a mixture of Van Halen with Ozzy's voice, and what we'd seen with Sabbath with Dio just a few months before just sank as Ozzy rose back to the top. And I think from that point, I realized that those first two albums, as I bet we're all going to agree, those first two Ozzy albums with Randy Rhoads are just perfect in a way. His voice, the melodies, there's so much melody in those songs. In fact, some of the songs are incredibly poppy in a way. If you actually take a few steps back, and the verse, chorus, middle eights, they are immaculately produced and written songs. But I agree, Martin, you don't know who's, all the people behind it. It's not Ozzy's got, there's a team involved. There's a team of people bringing that sound together. And like you, the albums that came soon afterwards, Bark of the Moon, it's fantastic. And there was that kind of rivalry. I don't know how it translated to where your part of the world, but the rivalry where I was in Birmingham was immense. Every time Sabbath did something, Ozzy took a snide move against it.
It's the same here.
With the Talk of the Devil live album was like a snub against Live Evil. There was this kind of battle between them going on all the way through the 80s. But I think that the knocks that Sabbath were getting with their changing lineups, they were slowly starting to fade as Ozzy just continued to, with the right backing and marketing and costumes and lighting, and his star just kept going up and up and up. And I agree with you, after No More Tears, which is actually one of my favorite Ozzy albums, I think after that there was some patchy stuff where it was like paint by numbers. And again, I don't mean any disrespect to any Ozzy fans who just see everything he's ever done as being like 10 out of 10, but there were, Zakk Wylde, I think, was a perfect foil for his voice in many ways, but some of the songwriting didn't hit the mark, and some of the later albums. But to me, that's what Ozzy is at number 2. And I think the last two, I know we might not agree on this, because I actually thought Patient Number 9 had some really good moments, and the ballad Ordinary Man, would have been the perfect exit door for him to go through. And now we're in this kind of no man's land where he's cancelling lots of gigs, and we don't know where the train's going to stop. So that Ozzy is my number 2. Number 1, sorry.
Yeah,
number 1.
Yeah, I mean, he's my number 1 kind of by default. And yeah, I'll echo what both of you said here. I think there's long stretches in his catalog that are just, albums that I just don't care about at all. They're just very generic sounding. But, it's hard for me to not pick Ozzy when you've got these two, right? And then these two. Yeah, they're all great. And then for me, and I'll agree with you, Phil, his last great album is No More Tears, right? Where's this one? I didn't pull out The Ultimate Sin, but it's and I also think that surprisingly, I liked Patient Number 9 more than I thought I would, because I haven't really enjoyed any Ozzy album in quite a long time. Probably Osmosis was the last one that I kind of thought was pretty good. But I think that Patient Number 9 would be a great way to go out and say, okay, that's it, calling it a career. I don't think Ozzy's going to do that. I think Ozzy's going to be making records and trying to play live in some fashion until the day he's gone. That's just the way he is. But there's enough good here. Like I said, No Rest for the Wicked is good. No More, everything up to, for me, everything up to No More Tears is really, really good to great. And then after that, but it's hard for me not to put him at number one when those first two albums, especially, are just so treasured to me, right? I had to put him at number one, but it's not perfect. He's got the disadvantage here because he's got this big long catalog, and even though there's a lot of stinkers, there's a handful of really, really great ones where the other three have just 3, 4 albums or whatever it is, right? And really three. And Martin, I don't know, what is your take on the Bill Ward band stuff? Because I listened to that and I didn't like that at all. I prefer just the
there's no full album there, is there? Isn't there just disparate tracks from over the years?
It's like these collections of things.
They get together, they do a couple things. There's some demos out there and stuff. It's almost like Phil Lynott with Grand Slam. It's just
it's kind of folky and bluesy and just didn't do much for me.
I don't know. Is there? I don't think there's a full album of that stuff.
I don't know. I listened to a whole bunch of stuff and I was kind of like, oof. Do
you think also with Ozzy, he was the only one that wasn't influenced by any kind of sense of new metal or what was going on around him? He just stuck to his template, didn't he? I mean,
I think as time goes on through the 90s and 2000s, he's influenced by all that stuff. Yeah,
but the dial is a lot lower than it was for sort of like Iommi and especially Geezer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You mentioned an interesting thing, Phil. A lot of fans kind of got down on Sabbath because they kept changing the lineup all the time. Tony had all these different singers and bass players and drummers and whatnot. Yet Ozzy did the same thing and nobody ever complained, but that's because it was Ozzy, right? It's that front man, that one guy, the one constant. It's different, I think, when people look at a band that's led by a guitar player and a band that's led by a singer, right? So, because Ozzy probably had arguably more lineup changes over the years than Sabbath did, but nobody cared about that, right? It didn't matter. As long as Ozzy was there, that's all we need, right?
It's because I think it's interesting that it was from when he started his solo career. I mean, I said that how big Black Sabbath were where I was in Birmingham, but they were a band led by someone called Ozzy, but they were just all basically the same. It was only in the 80s that Ozzy became like this personality, this larger than life character. I mean, listen to all the 70s live stuff. He's not swearing. He's kind of like, he just sings the songs. The introductions are quite laid back. In the 80s, he kind of reinvents himself and the personality becomes bigger than the music in a way, where Sabbath were just Sabbath, doing their stuff, releasing something. But Ozzy had got this extra weapon, really, which was his personality was out there, throwing buckets of confetti or water. There was all of this came along in the 80s. It wasn't around when he was with Sabbath at all.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Sure. So we're probably going to get people asking, so we'll tackle it right now. So we just talked about the solo albums from the original 4. So what if we throw Dio into the mix here? And does this Dio solo catalog of the Dio band, if we were to throw that into the mix, how does that change things for you guys, Martin?
He'd either be number 2 or number 1. So if we're playing by the rules, the rock and roll, we're talking about rock and roll. Dio's got to be number 1. I think just the consistency of the catalog is better than the Ozzy catalog. If we're just going to get all excited about art, I'd still got to put Bill Ward first and put Dio second. So I'm not sure. I got two sets of rules going on.
Phil, how about you?
I think I'd still have Ozzy just slightly ahead of Dio, I think. But he would be at number 2. Yeah,
I think I still don't think that any of the Dio solo albums would displace Blizzard of Oz and Diary. However, I think the consistency across the Dio catalog would make it my number 1. I think because it's there's no absolute stinkers in the Dio catalog. There's a couple albums that maybe don't do a ton for me, but there's enough solidness throughout that whole catalog that I think, and I probably listened to his catalog, top to bottom way more than I listened to a lot of those Ozzy records. So to me, the 2 best albums in all of these solo records are the first 2 Ozzy, but I think the Dio catalog is the strongest for me. So
nice,
cool. All right, Martin, anything you want to plug before we go? Let you go.
Yeah. So tomorrow night at 7, we've got a. There we go.
Still available, Martin?
Well, actually, the the Doom Let Loose has been replaced by the two from Weimar and greatly expanded as Sabotage and Born Again. FAQ, I think it's still available. I took it off my website ages ago, but it's funny you bring that up because on that front, because it's the 30th anniversary of my first book, and I was deeming to do this I was going to do it on Facebook, but every time I plug anything, I'm just going to mention the oldest book from the list, because at my site, you got to scroll all the way to the bottom to see old books. So the oldest book on my list still in print is Southern Rock Reviews. So it's 410 Southern Rock Reviews. So that's now back in print. But it used to look like that. And the publisher was smart enough not to put a Confederate flag on there. I think he had one to begin with, but although the American flag has kind of become the new Confederate flag, with the Canadian flag not far behind to follow. But so that's my oldest book still in print at martinpopoff.com. Contrarians, tomorrow night, we've got a live show at 7, which is greatest album covers on live albums. And then my audio podcast drops today, the new episode, which is called What is the Point of This Band?
Ooh, yeah, sounds good.
That Southern Rock book is indispensable, and I remember, because it's kind of that's how I am, because I'm cursed with this stuff. I remember when I first got that book from Martin. I've always been a big Southern Rock fan, and then all of a sudden I discovered all these like Southern Rock bands I never listened to or knew about before. And then, of course, what does idiot me do? I go and search and try and buy every single one of them that I can get my hands on, because you got to have them all, right? And yeah, it's great. That new version looks really good. That's
we only changed the cover, but the thing is, it cut off at 2000 anyway. So I thought, oh, that's a nice, neat point. So I think subtitled somewhere, at least on my site, it says Southern Rock, the beginning to 2000 or whatever, because we didn't redo the files on them. It just ends where it ends anyway. So, but yeah, they stuck a cover on it.
Cool. Well, I just wanted to say that Martin over the years has helped empty my bank balance with many of his books through that.
Thanks.
Sending me down rabbit holes of bands I'd never heard of, and then this person links to this person, links to this person, and the next thing you know, you've got about 55 things on order. I'm going to be covering the Sensation Alex Harvey band soon on Now Spinning Magazine, because that was a band that I probably should have mentioned when we did our bands that were famous in your home country but nowhere else, because that was an obvious one. So I've been listening to a lot of them, and I'll be covering their probably most famous album next pretty soon.
Cool.
By the way, I watched your whole guitar show this morning. That was amazing. Like, I learned a ton of stuff from you guys on that. So that's going to be an interesting thing that you guys have got going.
The next episode was a great choice, Peter. That looks really interesting.
I just delivered last night the list of guitar players to Phil, so we've got some work.
Yeah, there's some really good stuff on there.
It's Phil, it's amazing. As I was putting together my list and just kind of looking over my stuff and figuring out, and I'm like, holy hell, there's so many great guitar players we can do with this series. I mean, I picked 10 of them out, and I'm like, and like 4 of them are like, huge, well-known guys. And I'm like, man, I thought of all these other ones, and I'm like, we got plenty of time for all of them.
Yeah. And you're both players, you both know the gear and everything, and that comes out in it as well. So yeah, it's a good education.
Yeah, it was fun. I wasn't sure, like, when we talked about doing that series, I was like, it'd probably be a good solid half hour, right? And fill up the entire hour, and like we still had stuff to say. It was like, so it was cool. Thanks, Martin. Appreciate that. It was fun. It was fun. All right, what do we got going on here at the channel? Well, of course, it's Tuesday, so it's in the prog seat night tonight. So tune in later on this evening, right after this show, as a matter of fact, where we will be doing an album study for the Gentle Giant album Interview. So that's coming up, a brand new release, Stephen Wilson remix for Interview, and we're going to be kind of dissecting that album. So it's coming up tonight here on the channel. Tomorrow, of course, is What's Hot with Sea of Tranquility Day. I should have 5, 6, 7 new albums reviewed for you tomorrow. So that's happening tomorrow. And Martin will be back on Friday with me. We're going to be doing we have another interesting topic for you guys. Again, more on that to come. And then, of course, we got the UK connection on Saturday, and ranking the albums coming up on Sunday, where I will be ranking the short but really cool catalog of a great doom band called Windhand. So that's coming up Sunday. And till then, visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, all together, all the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and click on that notification bell so you get alert of all of our content. And please do hit the like button before you leave. And please do investigate all the stuff going on with these two fine gentlemen here. And we'll see you next time here on the show. For Phil and Martin, I am Pete. Have a good one, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.